And so I'll just jump right in. Nina Simone is even more popular in death than she was when she was alive, beginning with her debut album in 1958 to her final studio recording in 1993. iTunes today boasts of over 110 Simone albums to download, and for anyone who's, so she only recorded 40 of those, and the rest are compilations or remixes. And if you follow Nina Simone as passionately and obsessively as I do, you would know that she's the sole predecessor that Beyonce invokes in her documentary, Life is But a Dream. There are 2 Broadway musicals this year that are now closed called Soul Doctor and A Night with Janis Joplin, and there's a Nina Simone character in both of them. There have been 2 tribute albums in the last 2 years, one by a white avant-garde group from Seattle named Zuzu, and the album's called Nina, and then Michelle Ndegeocello released an album in 2012, as well as she's the figure in the forthcoming, very controversially cast biopic, Nina, starring Zoe Saldana. And in hip-hop, she's kind of ubiquitous, and so I wanted to that's my talk today. So she was invoked as both a mother muse and a radical rebel by multiple generations of wildly divergent artists who see in her art the reflection of America's best ideals and inspirations, and summon her often during times of our most contested political debates and dilemmas. Oh, here we go. Didn't do the sound. Didn't keep the sound. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. It lost the sound in that somehow. So I'm going to play it so you can hear. Sorry. So basically this is Billie Holiday's Nina Simone. Strange Fruit that I'm about to play. You should be able to hear. Okay, well, all of you are very familiar with Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit?
Yes.
Okay, so I will not play that. But you do need to know Nina Simone, so I'll just insert that. So I'll be inserting and talking at the same time right now. So it's in her afterlife that she has emerged as the ultimate icon from the 1960s, a repository for the collective pool of dreams, fears, belief, doubts, and desires that make up contemporary American culture. And while the mutability of her iconography has left her susceptible to decontextualization and oversimplification, it has also resisted a complete erasure or evacuation of her radical politics. Through the constraints and durability of her afterlife, we also understand the limits and legacies of America's last great revolution, what James Baldwin once called America's latest slave rebellion. And in such a telling, Nina Simone emerges as a legendary creator who represents the best and deepest veins of American national identity, as magical and elusive, capacious and contradictory as soul and freedom itself. Nina Simone once admonished that rappers have ruined music as far as I'm concerned. But her presence in contemporary American culture in general, and hip-hop in particular, has been on the rise since 1996, when former Fugees member Lauryn Hill brilliantly rapped, "I could do what you do easy. Believe me, frontin' niggas give me heebie-jeebies, so I imitate Al Capone. I be Nina Simone and defecating on your microphone." Sorry, I wish I could do it like Lauryn, but I can't. But those who know how good that line is. Thus rhyming herself into Simone's legacy, rather than the hyper-masculine American gangsterism that dominated much of the early 1990s hip-hop scene. At the time, Lauryn Hill seemed heir apparent to Simone's throne of sonic fluidity, political urgency, and bohemian black glamour, more than any other hip-hop artist. Sorry, this is tricky. Since that moment, however, the vast majority of Simone's material has been cited, covered, or sampled by a pantheon of African-American male hip-hop acts, including the socially conscious camp of Common, Mos Def, Talib Kweli, and the Roots, to the less politically inclined artists, such as 50 Cent, Cassidy, Flo Rida, who just sampled her this year, Lil Wayne, and most frequently and consistently by Kanye West himself. Given the hyper-masculinist nature of hip-hop, it may, in the widespread use of her music in this genre, as opposed to the more female-dominated musical spheres of pop, R&B, and gospel, It might appear strange to some listeners and unsuitable to others that she so sampled so frequently. In 1965, Simone released Strange Fruit on her album Pastel Blues. I have to actually insert this now. Okay. 1965, her album Pastel Blues, and she was the only artist in the 1960s to record Strange Fruit. And it was done as both a tribute and departure from Billie Holiday, whose 1939 version is what Stuart Nicholson characterized as, quote, one of the first examples of a popular song becoming impossible to disentangle from a single specific recording of it, end quote. Simone would later confess that this is the ugliest song I've ever heard. Ugly in the sense that it is violent and tears at the guts of what white people have done to my people in this country. I mean, it really opens up the wounds to talk about, when you think about a man hanging from a tree, to call him strange fruit. Okay, so I'm going to play it now. I'm going to do one more weird thing at some point, but we'll begin this. Similar to Holiday, Simone's version deviates from the song sheet. Do we not hear it? We don't hear it? Oh. Okay, let's do it. I don't know where it is then. You just saw me insert it.
You have to be in slideshow.
No, well, I did it to play automatically. No, you know, just cut this off, and then I'll just go straight. You don't need to see all the pictures, I guess. So cancel. Sorry. I did do this earlier and get it all done. Okay, so we will just hear our version right 1865. I do it so well because I talk over it. Oh my god, what's going on here? Wow, I'm just not going to do it this way anymore. I'm just going to do it there. Okay. Yeah, I know. Do you hear her though?
No, but no, that's a volume issue. It's not the recording.
Okay. Where's the volume? Sorry. Did you? So we'll just use the mic. I'll use the mic. I don't need to be that. Okay, so we'll get that on. Similar to Holiday, Simone's version deviates from the song sheet. But unlike that swing version, there's no instrumental leading, no small band encasement. The start of the song is Simone supporting her vocals with her piano playing. Animated by the radical politics of the 1960s, Simone's protest was even more melodically stripped down than Holiday's. She creates this effect through her strategy of genre reinvention, in which she grounds the song in a descending lament bass and revises Franz Schubert's 1828 The Doppelganger. By borrowing from the seemingly disparate musical codes and cultural histories of classical music, Simone transforms Holiday's familiar strange fruit into something unfamiliar and new, rendering European classical music as appropriate an archive for her model of resistance as was her predecessor, Billie Holiday. Okay. By tracing the hip-hop sampling of her version of Strange Fruit, I explore how hip-hop artists continue to keep Simone's legacy alive, as both a cultural icon and musical material that recalls a particularly radical moment of American culture, while these artists transform her in response to the aesthetic and political forces of their time. Rather than interpolate Holiday, Simone's voice could be heard in the contemporary hip-hop songs like Cassidy's 2007 cult favorite, Celebrate, Common's unreleased track often referred to as Strange Fruit from that same year, and Kanye West's most recent and controversial track, Blood on the Leaves, from his 2013 album, Yeezus. In terms of pure numbers of times sampled, Simone's presence is not nearly as constitutive or voluminous as a figure like James Brown, whose famous breakbeats and black nationalist commitment served as a form of sonic black radicalism from an earlier generation of hip-hop artists, most notably Public Enemy. To date, there are only 139 songs that sample her, compared to Brown's nearly 4,000. Yet she seems more sonically ubiquitous today than when she was alive. By reading her rise in hip-hop, I seek to understand how black radicalism has been embodied, gendered, and memorialized within mainstream hip-hop culture. And by doing so, I would like to give us a new direction in black studies by complicating debates about black women's influence on and invisibility in hip-hop, and recovering the varied ways her gendered vision of black freedom, and I'm quoting Ruth Feldstein here, gets incorporated into this primarily male-dominated musical form. In 2007, the producer Devon Springsteen Harris originally shopped his sample-based instrumental track featuring Simone's Strange Fruit to several artists, including Diddy, West, and Common. Initially, Common recorded a song that used this track, released another song that sampled Simone's Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood in his 2007 album, Finding Forever instead. The Strange Fruit sample did, however, end up on the song Celebrate by MC Cassidy on his comeback album, Bars, the Barry Adrian Reese story in 2007. When I asked Springsteen, the producer of the track, you guys hear this? When I asked Springsteen, the producer of the track, why he had chosen Simone's Strange Fruit over the holiday seminal version, he responded unequivocally, thinking, because of the rawness of her voice. Her vernacular is more direct, because of the intonation of her voice and style. There's something really black about her voice. And when you're trying to make black music, there's not a much blacker voice than Nina Simone. So of course, in a longer version of this, I unpack that statement. Today, I will not so much. In musical terms, Simone achieves this direct sound through her tone and complete lack of vibrato. She underscores this forward delivery as she stretches out the song's climax in the second to last line, for the leaves to drop, a peak that she maintains for a full 7 seconds, a period almost twice as long as Holiday's. Whereas Holiday leaves the final line open and unresolved, Simone's voice literally spans the distance of the minor 10th rather than Holiday's minor 3rd, dropping an octave and into a slow glissando. Simone's denouement sounds contained and unconstrained, not an outburst, but a disavowal, not just a refusal, an outrage of the ugly violence of American lynching. The sound quality of Simone's voice as vocal intrigue and commanding presence not only makes her an ideal choice for Springsteen's track, but also reinforces her symbolism as a political radical to such a large degree that these traits seem inseparable. In my interview with Common, a hip-hop artist best known for his political engagement, he said, "Strange Fruit was the first Nina Simone song I actually remember hearing. Like many members of his generation, our generation, he first heard Simone's name when Hill dropped that line in Ready or Not in 1996. But it was not until he formally collaborated with West and Springsteen in 2007 that he sampled her. Admittedly, the political and historical specificity that made Strange Fruit such a landmark recording for Billie Holiday also posed a problem for Common. When Nina Simone sings that song, you feel the pain of the people being hung. You feel the struggle of black people just surviving and really going through the struggle of just existing. I think her version is so powerful and just hits you in the stomach, Common told me. He went on to say, but when I got that song, I didn't know what to do with it because it was such a strong song in itself to sample. And I didn't want to only rhyme about slavery or people being hung, so I decided to use it as a metaphor for something else. That something else is both Common's tracing of the bloodline of African-American disenfranchisement and African diasporic disenfranchisement from Ashanti and slums as children with guns, AIDS and poverty killing our young, and is working through that period of America's racial past in order to speak to his new post-civil rights audience. In Cassidy's Celebrate, because the sample of Strange Fruit is set against his more personalized lyrics of self-reflection and redemption. So it's the same sample, that's why you hear John Legend. They're two different rappers. The original meaning of Strange Fruit is even more transformed and arguably more metamorphosized than Common's. At the time of his song's release, Cassidy was, and perhaps is still best known for his 2004 single Hotel, which featured R. Kelly, and a 2005 Swiss Beats produced I'm a Hustler, thus making him seem like a more counterintuitive inheritor of Simone's legacy than someone like Common. Appearing on his Bars album, the record that he recorded after serving more than a year in jail and suffering a near-fatal car accident, the inward and individualized story of loss and redemption and celebrate, I used to pump dimes, now I spit punchlines, fits with the album's themes of faith and doubt, mourning and celebration, and death and rebirth. The opening quote from Simone, "Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze," seems to function as a type of framing device. It's the first and last thing we hear. In the beginning of the song, it is featured prominently, and it is loud and full. Within this song, neither Cassidy's rhyme nor John Legend's chorus act as focal points. Instead, the listener is repeatedly drawn to Simone's retreating and re-emerging singing voice. At the end of the track, however, the sample of Simone returns to a more prominent position. And in some ways, the organization of the song, sound of the song, challenges Common's linear and futuristic vision. Instead of being only about black pain or resistance, the song now derives its meaning from juxtaposition. The strange dissonance of Simone's lament tied to the breakbeat, the cry wed to Cassidy's exaltation, y'all could live it up, but don't give up the fight. Y'all we're elevating, so we're celebrating the night. It is his freedom song. And for Springsteen, who produced the track, like many other hip-hop producers, sampling is always an homage to the past, a digging in the dustbins of history to shape the airwaves of the present. And in many ways, sampling's ability to help invent a new musical genre and transform sound production lies at the heart of hip-hop's own radical aesthetics. But it is Springsteen's cousin, Kanye West, however, the hip-hop producer and MC who has most reverently and repeatedly cited Simone in his oeuvre that I am actually most interested in. Originally known for his soul-based sampling, West has credited his mother, Dondra West, for his musical and intellectual development. I read the book Raising Kanye, while his early hip-hop production aesthetic notably sampled Aretha Franklin, Chaka Khan, and Shirley Bassey. On subsequent albums, Kanye has sampled the High Priestess of Soul, quoting only the instrumentals from her 1964 version of Sea Lion Woman on his song Bad News, a melancholic elegy to his mother on his 2008 electro-pop album 808s and Heartbreaks. While there's no sample of Simone's music on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, he cites her alongside Maya Angelou and Gil Scott-Heron as the album's inspiration. On his 2011 album with Jay-Z, Watch the Throne, and a song produced by the RZA, their most introspective song about an imagined male prodigy. So this is before Blue and before North. The song New Day samples Simone's. So that song, they're all talking about this boy child that they imagine and the kind of vexed legacy for that child because of their celebrity fame. Anyway, on that song, they sample Nina Simone's Feeling Good, and yet it is on his most recent album, Yeezus, that he cites Strange Fruit. So unlike the celebratory or liberatory potential that undergird Common and Cassidy's versions, West's use of Simone's song is more conflicted, given the sexist lyrics and video imagery that defines much of his work. This tension between Simone as musical progenitor and West's own ambivalent about women's sexuality and motherhood is at the heart of his song, Blood on the Leaves, a song that synthesizes and raises the pitch of Simone's Strange Fruit to such a degree that it is almost unrecognizable. And it appears to be a much more robust counterpart to his 2005 hit Gold Digger, which sampled Ray Charles's love song, I Got a Woman. Updating that angst, he now laments his failed romantic relationships. You could have been somebody, you could have been somebody, that were fueled by sex, taking MDMA or Molly's, and second-string bitches trying to get a baby, who trap him into alimony payments by refusing to get abortions. Within this narrative, Wes's use of Simone's piano accompaniment and his remixing of her phrasing, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees, takes on a new and neutralizing meaning. Out of its original context, the image of lynched black bodies are now unwanted fetuses. And while in the post-Roe v. Wade era, such fetuses carried obviously huge symbolic and political weight in the battle over women's reproductive rights, Wes's lyrics are not a politics of allegiance with the women's rights movement, but an ongoing animus targeted at sexually aggressive women, particularly those who are his peers or potential lovers. But there's always another story when you're using Nina Simone. And I'm going to be wrapping up as soon as I... So during his 2013 VMA performance, these images, black bodies hanging from trees and fetuses tightly wrapped in an umbilical cord, become even more substitutable when he performs the song in front of a light box image that projected the image of an enormous weeping tree. Director and visual artist Steve McQueen took the photograph, titled The Lynching Tree, while filming 12 Years a Slave. Near New Orleans, the tree once served as gallows for slaves. On the ground, around the tree is filled with several lynched victims buried underneath. According to cultural critic Wesley Morris, at various moments of his VMA performance, Wes got just close enough to be proportionate to its branches. We could have been somebody, Wes screams, placing an emphasis on body as though the word made him sick. As such, Wes's live performance partially sustains Simone's original critique of American racism by substituting his body, the mourned and missing African-American lynched victim. This disruptive move from subversion to sexism back to subversion has not gone unnoticed. In response to the album's release, Spin magazine published Jesus Talks, a critical roundtable, where several badass female cultural critics assessed and well psychoanalyzed Kanye West's bachelor party, called Jesus. Critic Pooja Patel describes Blood on the Leaves as a self-pitying yarn that scarily sounds like a request to emancipate himself from a woman he doesn't love, carrying a baby he doesn't want. But she also notes that this turns out to be the best song on the album. And this slippage between misogyny and artistic mastery is not Wes's alone. However, here it does expose the limits of Simone's radicalism within the post-civil rights. And I'm finishing this. Civil rights movement, which as Wes's sampling skillfully unveils, can be as malleable and manufactured as her sound itself. But if Simone becomes Wes's uneasy symbol of sonic experimentation and political confusion, she remains, more than any other musical figure, his model of rebellion and virtuosity, traits in Western music that have been almost exclusively sexually coded as male and often coded as white. And I'm going to end here. The gamble of hip-hop sampling, of course, is that the black woman's voice and sound becomes similar to the more dominant The gamble of hip-hop sampling, of course, is that the black woman's voice and sound becomes similar to the more dominant marginalizing of black women's bodies in hip-hop culture. In the selections we've listened to, the repetitive looping of Simone's voice in all of these songs could simply be another way to render the black female subject as decorative rather than generative within hip-hop culture, a prop for a particularly masculinist project of self-discovery and rebirth. Moreover, upon first listening, the use of Simone's cover of Strange Fruit in these songs risk being read or heard as the simple appropriation of the disembodied black female sound exclusively in service of black male protest or complaint. But interviews with and statements by the artists themselves sometimes contradict such a reading. By sampling that utterly recognizable sound of Nina Simone, Springsteen and West, Common and Cassidy, engage in a conscious citation of sonic black radicalism, in which Simone is both founding mother and a daughter. And by no means does this make any of these artists black feminist artists or feminist artists. Their varied forms of self-identification and investments in our music, however, serve as examples of their efforts to inherit and experiment with the black feminist musical legacy in the present. They not only place African American women's voices at the center of the ongoing Black freedom struggle, but for a brief moment can politicize themselves in their post-civil rights audiences as well. Thank you. Thank you.
You're doing Justin. I think hopefully. So far so good. This semester has been none. NTA.
I still work on it.
Yeah, but it's not the same. I don't have to prepare classes, examples. Family. It's a historical and sociological perspective.